And we're live again. So thanks everyone for joining the JakartaOne live stream again. And we're at the session that we're calling Jakarta EE Steering Committee Panel. So this is the opportunity for everyone to ask questions of the key people in the working group. And in order to make sure we actually go through all of the steering committee or most of the steering committee members, we divided this group, this session into two parts. And the first part here, we're going to have Will Lyons from Oracle. He's Senior Director of the Product Management at Oracle. We are going to have Dan Bandera, who is Program Director at IBM, and then Steve Millage, founder of Payara. So this is the opportunity for you to get the questions going. But till we do that, I will start asking some hard questions to our panelists. So for example, to kick us off, what are, in your opinion, the most important features of the Jakarta EE8 release? So why don't we start with Will Lyons from Oracle?
Sure. Jakarta EE8 is fully compatible with Java EE8. So the most important feature of Jakarta EE8, from my point of view, is that it is fully compatible with Java EE8. So that, subject to the appropriate testing, any Java EE8 compatible application server should be Jakarta EE8 compatible as well. And so implementations which are already certified with Java EE8 should be able to support Jakarta EE8, and applications that run on Java EE8 application servers should run on Jakarta EE8 application servers. And going forward, implementations can leverage that and claim compatibility with that history of enterprise Java in going forward Jakarta EE8 and future implementations based on the compatibility future implementations provide with Jakarta EE8. A little bit longer, but compatibility is my number one answer.
How about you, Dan?
Well, that was certainly on my list too, Will. But I think another important key aspect is that just the fact that the source code for the TCKs is out there and publicly available as open source, and it's being managed by the community itself. So that's a very important feature because people can actually look at the tests, they can examine the tests, and going forward, I think this is going to help us build even more comprehensive and better coverage, more comprehensive tests for the base platform. And I think that's a real important feature of Jakarta EE8, just the openness of the TCKs.
Thank you, Dan. And Steve?
Okay, I don't think I've got any left now. So, I mean, for me, open source is the key, really, is that, as Dan said, the software, the test suites, the APIs and the specifications are now open in the community. And another feature, which is not a software feature, but the feature is the community itself is being very welcoming. So we're like a pretty new vendor, and we get involved and do our thing as well, and been welcomed by everybody, from the major guys like IBM and Oracle there. So being welcomed as an equal is great. And now going forward, we hope that many others get involved, and we can take it forward through open source philosophy.
Thanks, Steve.
Can I make just one more comment about that? There really is a change here in that. In releases of Java EE, Oracle had, driven maybe 34 of the 38 specifications, or something of that nature. in this release, responsibility for specifications has been much more widely distributed across all the members of the working group. So it is truly a community effort and not a single vendor driven.
That's a good comment, Will. I mean, it was astounding how when it looked like chances were slim to hit our release date today, that everybody just started rolling up their sleeves and pitching in. So we had very broad support in getting us to this launch. Very broad support. It was a wonderful community effort.
Yeah, I have to second that. That was, for me, being part of the Eclipse Foundation and observing stuff, the most impressive about this release, pulling everyone together and making the date.
So
Okay.
Tanya, I think we got to ask the audience to maybe put some questions in the chat. I don't know. It's very quiet out there right now.
I actually have a first question here in the questions section. So how does the certification process work? What are the testing steps beyond downloading the TCK and running it? Is there any fee anymore to certification? Are there terms of use after certification? So the certification process.
Well, the certification process is documented pretty well, and it took us months to produce, so I don't think a quick summary does it justice. But there's a process. It's very open. There's no fee for it. You have to run the tests. You have to pass the tests. You have to take your results and show them to the community. And if you've done all those things, you can claim that you're a compatible implementation. I don't know, Will, if you want to elaborate.
Well, I believe the Eclipse Foundation, in terms of using the logo with your compatible implementation, there's a requirement that you sign I believe it's called a compatibility and branding agreement with the Eclipse Foundation. And so Oracle, for example, needs to sign that agreement before we can use the Jakarta EE logo. And that permits you to use the logo and claiming all your marketing materials, the brand of Jakarta EE compatible.
That's a good point, Will. There's a subtle difference. You can run the tests and you pass them and post the results. You can claim compatibility. It's a truthful statement. But Will's absolutely right. If you want to use the Jakarta sailing ship logo, you have to be a member of Eclipse, you have to be a member of the working group, and you have to have the license. You have to execute the license with Eclipse. All of those things. But that's if you want to use the logo. I was just when I first spoke, I was just referring to the compatibility aspect in your claim.
Yeah, and there is a fee, but to join the working group, but those fees are stepped based on the size of the organization. So they're not big great barriers for for commercial organizations. For non-commercial, we can sponsor through a commercial organization and pure open source implementation, which I believe is what Tommy Tribe are sponsoring the Apache one, but they'll be able to say more about that when they're on.
Yeah, David will be on in the second half.
Yeah. So the next question, are there plans to break the current monolithic TCK into pieces to each API repo and can own its own TCK repo? MicroProfile does this, spec, doc, API, TCK, all in the same repo, and it works quite well.
I think a lot of us are on both the specification committee and the steering committee, so that's really more of a specification committee. But there has been a lot of talk about where we go in the future. How can we break down things? How every single project can have its own TCK bucket. Those are things that for the community to step up and help us with. But it's definitely a topic of interest among many of us. Steve?
Yeah, I was going to say, so there's definitely a desire. Plans is probably too strong a word.
Yeah.
There's a desire in each project to own their TCKs and move them into the into that specific project. Some of them are there already, obviously, and others aren't. but it's a big piece of work, and we, like I say, we'll need assistance from the community to do that piece of work.
A lot of the specs are covered by TCKs that are in the platform itself. They don't have their standalone. And so, as Steve was saying, there's been some thoughts about, well, how could we refactor that? How could we improve that?
Tanya, I see a question in chat from Octavia Santana. What became of the relationship between Java SE and Jakarta EE now? In the past, we had Java SE 8, Java EE 8, but now there are 6-month releases. He's referring to the Java SE release train. So I actually haven't read the Jakarta EE specification on this point, but I assume the language is the same, that the Jakarta EE 8 specification must be tested on a Java SE 8 implementation or greater. So you can test on Java SE 8, but you can also test on SE 11, for example, or later releases. So that was the language in the Java EE specification, the Java EE platform specification. I assume that remains true in the Jakarta EE platform specification. I don't know whether Dan, you or Steve have read those specific sentences.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, I don't know if there's any specifics, but I can't imagine us targeting 6 monthly releases. I'd imagine, again, this is just my thoughts, targeting LTS releases of the Java when we.
Yeah.
Sorry?
You mean as a vendor, I assume? You could test on Java SE 9.
Oh, yeah, you could. I mean, I think from a specification point of view, if it's specified any minimum, it would probably be an LTS minimum, or as opposed to a.
I don't think there. Yeah, Steve. I don't think there's been any decision on that at all. But I do think there's been talk of that's exactly the approach. Go from LTS to LTS.
So there is also a question. What about growl support to make us small and fast?
So we're in the WebLogic team. We've actually GraalVM is a JVM which you can use to reduce your footprint size and make startup faster and improve performance. We are actually in the WebLogic team in the process of beginning to test WebLogic Server with GraalVM. So that's something that any implementation can test today. I know that some of the Quarkus, at least, and the Helidon implementation are testing with the GraalVM and the MicroProfile side. I haven't heard any discussion of using GraalVM in specifications, but that's a technology that could be used.
There's also the Eclipse's own OpenJ9. OpenJ9 has got some very cool features. They have ahead of time compilation. They have some tuning you can do for cloud native. That's all over at the Eclipse OpenJ9. And in addition to that, it is full Java, so it has reflection on methods and so on. So there's more than one approach that you can go for fast and small.
I would say, aren't we all already fast and small? That's the thing.
Well, of course.
I mean, I assume we mean Graal native as opposed to just GraalVM.
Yeah, that's what I was guessing.
So, I mean, I can't imagine anything specifying Graal native, but obviously that will be a thing that will be looked at in individual application servers. I mean, the beauty is this API won't specify a native VM, but the application servers will always fight it out on trying to be the smallest and fastest and things. But obviously, there's usages outside of cloud and containers that would require just normal VMs and OpenJ9.
So while we're waiting for additional questions in the chat, I'll just ask you, so we're continuously inviting people to join and help us out. How does one get involved with Jakarta EE specifications?
I have a cheat sheet.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I could just remember how to share. There are no more cheats in the event.
I don't think you can share. Do you have a link?
Okay. Well, maybe I'll just paste this. I'll cut and paste from a presentation that I gave earlier today into chat.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So, there's just a lot of resources available online. In terms of really getting deeply engaged in the projects and participating, there's a process to become an Eclipse committer, process either to leverage your company's membership in Jakarta EE or to become a member of the Jakarta EE Working Group. So there's some links there, a lot of resources to look at, but some of the keys are become a committer to the Eclipse Foundation would be a good starting point.
Which means you're a member first. So you could be an individual member, but
correct. Yes.
Right. You can be an individual member. You have to sign the contributor licensing agreement so that there's the correct IP capture. And you have to become a member of each of these projects that are in the working group. So there's a number of steps, but they are very well documented on the Eclipse site. So I thought Will was going to project, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so let me move on with the other questions that I have. I also have some of the questions that are prepared and suggested here by Reza, so I will be going over these questions. What is the overall status of the transfer of spec documents? And do you know how this process is going to be completed?
Will, you should take that one.
Okay, I'll get into that. So Oracle has, in the case of Oracle, and we own most of the Java EE8 specification documents, we've contributed them to the Eclipse Foundation. Oracle did not own the, and by the way, I am not an IP expert as a result of being involved in this process. I've learned more about IP than I ever would have wanted to know. But non-legal terms, Oracle does not own copyright to all of the content in all of those documents. And so the Eclipse Foundation has begun to go through a process of obtaining copyright clearance, and I'm not using proper legal terminology, but that's essentially what it is, from any remaining individuals who may have owned the copyright in some of those documents, and that's an ongoing process. So I believe all the members of the working group, so IBM and Payara, et cetera, I believe have signed over their copyright rights so that these documents, the copyrighted content of those specifications can be used in going forward Jakarta EE8 specification documents. Is that the focus of the question? All the Java docs are contributing and so on, so that's already clear. That's the specification text, which remains an issue, and from the standpoint of the major vendors, to the extent we can contribute, we have done so, and there's just a legal process that needs to go through, that needs to be gone through to obtain clearance from any other individuals who might own copyright in those things.
Yeah, the bulk of the intellectual property in the specification documents was authored by actually either Oracle, Red Hat, IBM, or one of our other members of the strategic committee, like Payara or Tommy Tribe. So there's a lot of coverage already. The thing is if you contribute a little tiny bit, your authorship might be there. And so Eclipse is going through the process of going down the list. But right now, honestly, almost all of that has been transferred from, is from a practical standpoint when you look at the size of the documents. But I'm not a lawyer either, so, and I've never played one on TV or video. So.
Okay, so there was a question from your son, and then I think Amelia already answered. So the question is mainly, it was directed to Eclipse Foundation, but maybe you should take this question and give your answer. So how do you see MicroProfile and Jakarta project collaboration under the Eclipse Foundation?
Well, there's been a lot of interest in it for sure, because a lot of the people in one are in the other. So there's an awful lot of interest. But right now, MicroProfile is an independent top-level project at Eclipse, and all of the Jakarta projects are under a specific working group, which MicroProfile is not part of yet. There are some things to be worked out for just from a process basis and to make that marriage happen. But I know my team at IBM is extremely interested in figuring out, what the best way forward in that. So I can just speak for IBM. We've got a lot of interest in seeing what the best way to bring those together.
Yeah, so from the Payara perspective, again, as Amelia said, a lot of it's up to the MicroProfile community. It's a different project within the Eclipse Foundation under a different PMC. However, it is a lot of the same people on both sides. Payara supports both, or will support Jakarta EE when we get our compatibility sorted, and we support MicroProfile. So in that perspective, there's no problem for technically supporting both on a single runtime. We'd quite like to merge a lot of the process side of things, because currently we have to manage two PMCs and two projects, and that's a bit of an overhead. So I'd be keen to bring MicroProfile under the E4J top level project, which is not the same as bringing it under Jakarta EE. But it would simplify some of the process overhead involved. And then there's two ways we can work. We could either use MicroProfile as it is, and Jakarta EE could standardize some of the APIs that have been created under the Jakarta namespace, or we could, just adopt them, without talking with MicroProfile in that sense. But there's lots of things to be sorted out, really. But both of them can work together already.
From my perspective, from an Oracle perspective, we're interested in seeing alignment across these efforts. The intent to support Jakarta EE. We support a MicroProfile implementation today, and I think just from a positioning and marketing and promotion perspective, it takes a little bit of the uncertainty out of the equation around, are these collaborative, are they synergistic, or are they competing? I don't think it's in the interest of either community to be perceived as competing. I think there's more synergy than competition, and I'd like for the efforts to be structured that way, and we'll see what we can do.
And and what we're talking about here really is the specification efforts, having a common way of doing that and bringing all that together. From an implementation standpoint, I think Ian Robinson in this morning's industry keynote pointed out that Open Liberty already fully supports both Jakarta EE8 and MicroProfile 3. So from an implementation standpoint, we feel strongly enough to bring that together now, but it's the specification and the work efforts that I think we're talking about here.
Thank you. So I'll move to the next question in the question section. One concern we frequently hear is how Java EE and now the extension Jakarta EE is a legacy technology. as members of companies who have significant stake in application server runtimes, are you able to share any observations as to whether Java EE, Jakarta EE is being used in the greenfield projects, or has it noticeably decreased in popularity compared to other runtimes or frameworks?
Well, I'll take a crack. I think there certainly is a move to microservices-based architectures, which are polyglot. Use of other languages in the same cloud infrastructure, let's say. But Java is an enormously popular and successful language, and the Java EE technology, Jakarta EE technologies, excuse me, are used very widely. And how to provide REST is important, and how to call Java applications using REST, and how to process JSON documents is all very important. And then within the MicroProfile community, there are a lot of other standards that have been defined around health checks and configuration and so on. So I think all of these technologies are still very relevant in a new world, which is becoming polyglot, in which Java plays a very important role.
Yeah, I agree, Will. And the last set of statistics I've seen on research of developers, Java remains one of the most popular languages on the on Earth. I mean, it's got something like 13 million developers. That's a lot of skill out there, and it's being applied to application modernization for the cloud and for other things. You're right. People are starting to use other languages. But the enormity of the talent base and the people out there among our clients that can use Java to do their app modernization and migrate to a microservices architecture, I think that is certainly one of the options they have. And I think that's going to give Java and Jakarta EE a long future.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly seeing greenfield projects in, Jakarta EE as will be. And I think the actual model of Jakarta EE, where you separate your application development from your runtime infrastructure, is actually a perfect fit for where modern architectures are going. When you look at Kubernetes and containers and that side of things, you can see the current application server will maintain how it looks and feels for many applications, especially in microservices. But the fact that we have a managed runtime underneath a well-defined set of APIs for building business applications is a perfect fit for Kubernetes and modern cloud architecture, where you would just take a WAR file or a deployment and throw it at the cloud, and it just works. And that separation that's explicit within Jakarta EE between the runtime and the app actually is very powerful abstraction as you move into cloud architectures.
Thank you all. So I think we can squeeze in another question. So let me see. So Jakarta EE tooling support across IDE, especially around Eclipse. I almost feel I can answer this one. So this really depends on the community as well, right? I'm sure everyone from the Jakarta EE world would love to have all the support that is needed in the tools. I think that's already existing. If there is something missing, especially in the Eclipse IDE, we would love to get everyone interested and help out implement that. Any comments from anyone else? Okay, so let's see if there is something. Okay, there is an interesting question as well. Does the Eclipse Foundation plan to move all Java projects under Jakarta EE? Again, I almost feel I can take this one and just quickly respond that it's really not up to Eclipse Foundation because we would welcome all the projects to Eclipse Foundation, but we cannot contribute to ourselves. So only the community out there can, do something about it. I'm sure from our perspective, any project will be welcomed.
Just a side comment. I don't think it makes sense to sweep every single Java project under Jakarta EE. There's a lot of reasons. So another aspect of it is it a good fit? We've already talked a little bit about maybe MicroProfile looks like a promising fit, but there are other things at Eclipse that there's no reason nobody would gain, either side, the PMCs would not gain anything from doing that. But that's left to the community. If those PMCs want to join forces, that's up to them.
So at this point, I'm just thinking just to give a chance to other steering committee members to answer some of the questions from the community. I would like to invite them, and I would like to thank Will, Steve, and Dan. And you can catch all of them online or at Code One at San Francisco, and you can chat more about Jakarta EE and other relevant Java projects. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah. Everyone stay here until I pull other steering committee members onto the screen. So I will invite Kenji from Fujitsu. I will invite David Blevins from Tommy Tribe. And John Clegan from Red Hat. Hi, Kenji.
Hello.
Hello,
How are you
hello.
doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good.
Hey, John.
Hello, hello.
Hello. So let me see what other questions do I have still on the list while David is jumping on. So let me see. There was an interesting question.
Sorry to interrupt, Tanya. David said to try that again.
Yep, just working on it. So if you can see questions on the Ask a Question section. Okay. David, let me know if you had any problems with the invite or re-invite, I should say. So let me read the question while we're trying to bring David in. Currently, on certain business areas, Java EE/Jakarta EE has a bad and false reputation of an overbloated mess of unnecessary APIs running on overbloated application servers. Any plans to improve the promotion of Jakarta EE for what it really is and can do?
Well, I'll try and take a crack at that.
Thank you.
I think it's pretty apparent. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So I think, I can't remember if it was Dan or Steve who brought this up in the first half of the call. But I think there's a lot of proof out there that that's already a kind of a false label, a misnomer. When people think about, make those comments, they still make the assumption that this is, Java EE4 or J2 EE 1.4. And that's kind of this label that we've long overcome, right? So today we have implementations that are highly dynamic, only load the pieces of the application server that you need to run your application. There's runtimes that use Java EE technologies like Thorntail, Helidon, Quarkus, for instance, that are more kind of dependency based, right? So you're literally only binding to the technologies that you want to use, right? It's more of a historical Tomcat, add what you want kind of model, right? So we have this, technically we've solved the problem a long time ago, actually. From a business perspective, that is something I think that we as a community can do, right? So I'm looking, there's 1,240 people on the line right now. That's 1,240 people that can, have discussions with the broader Java community or even other non-Java communities to kind of, push back on that label and say, based on what, right? So we really do have, I think, a collection of specifications within Jakarta EE. You can use just the ones you want from a technical perspective, so, from my perspective, it's like, what's the problem? I'm sure that we could do some things perhaps from the Jakarta EE marketing level right around that. And we're starting to get to that with the cloud native label. So I'll pause and Kenji, if you want to add anything or if Dave's on yet.
Yeah, current Java EE is very complex and there are a lot of dependency of each API. So I think it depends on the customer and the vendor. So if the customer wants to use legacy code such as Corva and J2EE, so the burden is the complex dependency. So the vendor choose for the product that which provides complex product or a smart product. This is a choice of vendors.
You're on mute, Tanya.
Thank you for pointing that out. I'm trying in the background to bring David in, and we're still having some technical difficulties. So I do see David in the session, but I cannot. I do see David in the event, but I don't see him in this session. However, let me see another question because we're having an additional question came in. So let me see. Do you see Glassfish project and the Jetty server, also an Eclipse Foundation project, staying entirely separate, or will there be an opportunity for code sharing or other collaboration between them?
So this is, I'll provide a comment kind of from the outside looking in because I'm not directly involved in either project anymore. But I think what I'll say is where the collaboration can happen still is at the specification level, right? So within the EE4J, projects. So that's an area of collaboration. In terms of technical integration, that would be, I think, up to the Glassfish project, for instance. If the question is more about will Glassfish basically utilize Jetty as a servlet implementation, that's more directly up to that project. So I don't want to make any recommendations or comments about that because I'm not really directly involved with either of those projects.
Yeah, it depends on the Glassfish community, but right now, the Glassfish is one of the compatibility implementation of Jakarta EE. So if we migrate JT stuff to Glassfish, so we need a lot of work for Glassfish. So it depends on when we change Glassfish code base to JTO and how complicated this work. It depends on the community issue.
Okay. And now we have David on the screen finally. So thanks,
Am
David,
I
for being
audible?
persistent.
Do you hear me? I'm always persistent.
Yes, that's fantastic.
I think that happens when you're in the industry for 20 years implementing Java EE in open source.
David, are you on mute maybe?
Ton, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah,
right.
we can't.
What do you
I
mean
can
you
hear you.
cannot?
Oh, now I can hear him.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you. So questions, we wanted, I don't know, have you had a chance to hear our questions?
Yep.
If you have any comments, David, please go ahead.
Well, I wanted to comment on a question that was thrown to the earlier group, and that was, has anybody, doing any, greenfield development with the stuff in our space? And, right now, we're starting a relationship with the company that just got $100 million in Series B funding, and they're going to spend a lot of that developing their future on MicroProfile. So I really think that that's a huge statement about where we're at. When we get together and create things in open source and make standards and specifications in open source, huge impact can be made, right? And so that's a huge sign of traction. So this is not, not something to be ignored. And the only reason that they don't mention Jakarta EE is we're just getting started, right? But you look forward, 2 years when we've got, a bunch of stuff under our belt in terms of new development. And that's the future that we have in store for us here. And so I really think that it's not something that is subjective in saying, yeah, we're making progress. It's concrete. I know people who are, CTOs of various companies, and they've decided to shift all their stuff down that path and the MicroProfile path, and now we're looking at Jakarta and all the stuff that we're doing here. So, we're going to see these case studies in another 2 years, and those developments and those decisions are made now. And so I think it's going to be pretty impressive to see the stories that come out, in another 2 years. I don't know if you guys have anything to add, if you've seen any major developments happen and stuff in our space.
Thank you, David. There is another question. Any plans to bring the JCache spec to Jakarta EE?
Well, I think that one depends on the JCache people. So that spec is co-led by Hazelcast, specifically Greg Luck and Oracle. And so that would be their decision to do it. I would certainly welcome it.
Okay. So one question that is on many people's minds, but I'm not sure I'm seeing any questions in the chat with regards to that. Are there any updates on the namespace changes and that will take place for Jakarta EE 9? And will it take place at Jakarta EE 9?
I don't know, John, you're on mute. You want to jump in? I'm happy to talk, but I don't want to be doing all the talking.
No, I mean, we had, you've been,
I'm sorry, I was asking questions here and talking, but I was on mute, so I apologize for that. I have another question for you guys. I don't see that it is being asked, but I'm pretty sure that it's on many people's mind. And that is, are there any updates on the namespace changes, and will those changes take place at Jakarta EE 9? And if not, which version we can expect that?
Go ahead, John.
Well, I was going to mostly defer to you, David, since you did a lot of the heavy lifting around the analysis. And I have been chatting around some of the other questions. Just a quick thing here. I think it does, at this point, it does make sense to look at the, new namespace with the next release and begin that, that transition. But the details of the transition still around Big Bang versus incremental. David, I know that you've done a lot of the like deep analysis around the interconnection of the various specs, and if you pull one, how many does that pull in? So I'll let you go ahead and the surprising lead spec that pulls all the other ones in.
Yeah. So as John mentions, we did some work, basically doing a bytecode analysis of all of the interconnections between the specifications, and if you change specification A, how many other specifications does that impact? And the net result was that if you touched activation, it cascades to like 40% of the specifications. And you add CDI in there, and it really hits a lot of them. And in fact, when you get down to it, if you hit a lot of the specifications that we would like, such as, like I say, activation, CDI, JTA, the specifications left over that don't have any ties to other specifications and would be eligible to then not be moved into Jakarta are specifications like JPA, that of course we would want to switch that anyway. And so a lot of the newer stuff that's completely independent, we would probably still want to move, and there's really only a few opportunities to leave specifications behind. And so it really comes down to what do we do with those specifications? And do we want to deprecate some things? But it does look like we're looking at a 60 to 80% change, no matter if your perspective is incremental or Big Bang. So we prepared a tool, an online kind of calculator, to allow people to poke at specifications and say, if I change this one, which ones have to be changed? And we had to put it down to focus on the Jakarta EE 8 release, but after that's now, we'd like to pick it back up, clean it up. It's missing the JavaX inject specification, so our bytecode analysis didn't incorporate that specification. And during the Jakarta EE 8 process, we did decide to make that a project. And so we're going to have to redo the bytecode analysis with that one factored in. That may make it even harder to do any sort of incremental, because that one's used in a lot of specifications as well. So I don't know if if that answers people's questions or not, but more than likely, it's going to have to. We're going to have no choice but to do some sort of changeover in Jakarta EE 9. Otherwise, we aren't going to have the ability to update any of the specifications practically. So we're definitely going to see something in Jakarta EE 9. Whether it's complete or not, I think remains a community decision that needs to be made.
Yeah, Big Bang and incremental, either way, David said we have no choice. We must change it. But the point is compatibility. Both binary compatibility and source compatibility is important. And whether Jakarta EE 9 will successful or not is depends on how much we can provide the compatibility. So let's start a discussion how we vendor cooperate to create some tools in order to our customer have a compatibility issue.
And so actually, if I may add one thing, I think, David and Kenji pointed on a couple of really important, or a really important point is that we have to provide backwards compatibility as vendors, right, through our implementations. If all the specs change, we can't break all of the applications that are out there, right? We have to find a way to let existing applications run on implementations that support, a different namespace. Technically, we'll have to work on ways to figure that out. But if we can't do that, it's actually a non-starter in my opinion. But we have to do that. All right, thanks.
Thank you all. So I guess this one is for David. What do you think the timeline is going to be for getting Tommy EE to full Jakarta EE8 compliance?
Yeah, so we've done some initial runs of the TCK and to get, kind of a gauge of where we're at. So fortunately, although we didn't have access to the Java EE TCK on the Apache side of the fence, others such as SAP did have access to it and were able to certify Tommy as Java EE7 web profile compliant in their HANA Cloud platform. Maybe we can get them to join the working group. That would be awesome. Also, so on that first run we did, we got, after clearing away some of the early issues, we're up to about 90% complete, which is amazing that we can even say that, because in the past that would have been illegal. You can only say you pass or you don't. You can't actually give any detailed status. So we're going to ship Tommy 8 probably this month, so that people have something to kick the tires on during code 1 and afterwards, and then finish out the remaining tests with the community afterwards. So we'll probably see a certified version of Tommy, probably say 8.1 or something going forward. But it's looking pretty good as it is already, and so I think that I was expecting worse results than 90%, and we're in much better shape than I thought. So we actually didn't get time to do the releases, but we do already have components like JSON B, JSON P, Open Web Beans, Bean validation. All these passing the TCKs already, and they had a few tweaks to do, and we need to get them released before we can file the certification requests. But everything's looking pretty good. And one thing I wanted to mention in the little time I had this morning, but didn't get to mention, is that actually Apache is hosting some of the only other implementations of specifications that we have. So JSF, the only other implementation in Mohara is MyFaces. The only other Java Mail implementation is Geronimo Java Mail. And the list goes on that they're actually the only other specification implementations out there are stuff at Apache. So all these TCKs are putting us in a position to catch up, to get these things certified, and to strengthen the ecosystem overall.
Thank you, David. We just got another question. Java 11 does not contain Java EE anymore, and Jakarta EE8 is tied to Java 8. People are moving on to Java 11. When can we expect a Jakarta EE release that is Java 11 and plus compatible?
So I'll take a crack at this one, just unless Kenji, if you want to lead this one.
I think one of the main feature of Jakarta EE9 is definitely Java 11 support. So most of our customers want new Java SE features. So if we do not support Java 11 in Jakarta EE9, nobody uses Jakarta EE9. So, and I think some of vendors already provide Java SE 11 support. Maybe Wildfly supports Java 11, but partially. So I think it is important that Jakarta EE9 officially supports Java 11. That is the main target of Jakarta EE9.
So Kenji stole my thunder. Yeah, so Wildfly already yeah, it supported JDK 11 with Wildfly 15. Wildfly 17.0.1.final supports Jakarta EE 8. So Wildfly already supports JDK 11. So yeah, separating out the runtime aspect of the JDK. There's no reason why existing implementations can't necessarily update to JDK 11. When it comes down to supporting the new APIs that are available in the stable releases of the JDK, yeah, that's going to be up to us, right? Us being the community, those that are involved in the specifications. If there's a feature that you want incorporated, in JDK 11 into a specification, get involved and be a part of that conversation. David?
Yep. I guess I would say there's two aspects to this question. So as John was kind of highlighting, there's running on Java 11, and then there's taking advantage of Java 11. They're two completely different things. So on the Tommy side of the fence, that was the major work that we wanted to complete to get Tommy 8 out the doors to make sure it ran perfectly on Java 11. And so we've done that, and that work is finished. And so when that comes out the door, it's going to be running just fine on Java 11. I would actually like to see a version of Jakarta EE 8 that officially acknowledges Java 11, because there are a handful of specifications removed from Java, the VM, including JAX WS, right, which is a pretty big one. And so, JAX B, these types of things are not officially part of the Jakarta EE 8 definition because they were previously in the JVM. And so for all of us to say we run on Java 11, we're actually kind of filling in a little bit of a hole that's there. And I would like to see an official specification release of Jakarta EE 8 that kind of formally fills that. Specifically because when we do all the Jakarta EE 9 work, there's going to be involved some namespace change. And so people may want to be on Java 11 for a while with Jakarta EE 8 until they're ready to digest that change. And so I think it's probably a good idea for us to give them something that they can live on in Java 11 for a while.
Okay. And now there is a question from Dahlia here. Thanks, Amelia, for your help. What are the plans for Jakarta EE around the area of modularity?
I don't think it's been actively discussed. And I think that it's one of those things where when the community asks what the plans are, my response is, good question, community. What are the plans? Right? Because this is an open source project now. And so, feel free to answer your own question in the chat there. What would you want in Java 11 support in Jakarta EE future, right? And feel free to write up some thoughts and send them to the mailing list.
Also, keep in mind. Oh, go ahead, Kenji.
Oh, there was some discussion about profiles. So Java EE 8 has two profiles, full profile and web profile, and also Jakarta EE has two profiles. But after Jakarta EE 9, we can add more profiles. In that case, modularity helps this multiple profiles.
Yeah, and then I was going to add, we already have, JBoss modules and Wildfly, which is a modularity system. We have OSGI that is used by multiple Java EE implementations. So then there's, obviously Java modularity at the JDK level. So that's going to be a very interesting conversation because there's a lot of implementations that already utilize modularity. So, do you create a spec that layers on top of, right, creates an abstraction over all of that? Do you force everyone to go off to JDK 9 modularity, or Java modularity? So that's going to be a very interesting discussion.
My statement on modularity before we move off the topic has always been basically this: you can take a country and you can break it up into 6 smaller independent countries, but it's going to be a long time before they actually can function independently, no matter if you've given them their own name and their own governments, right? And it's the same thing with code. You take this big thing and you split it all up because you got magical modularity, but to actually make them run independently is going to take a lot of work. And so,
So now, just that we're getting more interesting and even political at this point, we need to break this party off because we're moving into next session. I do have to thank you so very much. And David, I particularly need to thank you for your persistence to get on the screen. Same thanks for John and Kenji, and I will see you all in the next session. Thank you very much. Bye for now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.